Hey guys, welcome to our latest Connect conversation. So good to have you with us. My name is Tom MacDonald, and I'm the lead pastor of Scunthorpe Baptist Church, about to become Connect Church, and we're so excited about that. I'm so excited that you're watching this and you're part of this journey with us. And I'm delighted, really delighted. I have a great friend, Tom Seal, with us for the next half an hour or so to share some of his incredible wisdom with us. Some of you will have met Tom. He came to what was Scunthorpe Baptist Church last March, which feels like a lifetime ago. We'd never even heard of COVID-19 when Tom came to us, and it's changed all of our lives. But Tom spoke amazing wisdom into our church. Tom is the assistant pastor of King's Community Church in Aberdeen, where you can see he's wearing layers because it's always cold in Aberdeen.
That's true.
Right. And I've known Tom and his wife, Leanne. They're 3 children, but I've known Tom and Leanne since our Mattersey days, which, Tom, is over a decade ago.
I know, that's wild.
It is crazy. So we've known each other for a long time, and I'm so just proud of you guys for how God has been at work in your lives and how you've just followed faithfully. It's so exciting what God has done even through you. So I've mentioned you guys are from King's in Aberdeen. Tell us a little bit about King's Church. Tell us about you guys, your role, what you do there. Just tell us about yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with King's because it's older than we are. It began in the 50s. An evangelist, like many Assemblies of God churches, an evangelist came up, started preaching in one of the communities in the city. Some people got saved, and so it would have been the early 50s. So for a number of years, just bounced around places, meeting in different halls, seeing people get saved. Ended up buying a kind of abandoned Church of Scotland building that was derelict in the early 60s. And for 30 years, no more than about 20 people met in this huge Church of Scotland building, and slowly they painted, repaired windows, did stuff like this, and the numbers would go up and down and up and down. The early 90s, a guy called John Strachan, who was pastoring the Assemblies of God Church up in Fraserburgh, which is about an hour further north of here, and was one of the biggest churches in Scotland at the time, certainly kind of in Assemblies of God circles, and he left that church and came to 6 people here in the building, and just slowly built up, loved the people, preached on Sundays, visited them during the week, and built the church over a decade, at which point in the early 2000s, his son-in-law Ian, who's now currently the senior pastor here, took the church on, about 150 people or so, and continued to just build on John's work, added a bit more kind of sense of vision and direction, and the thing has just grown and grown since then. We collided with King's about 5 years into Ian's journey of leading the church. So it's through Mattersey, actually, through one of the mission trips. Leanne and I were engaged to be married and had no money because we were trying to pay for a wedding. And we chose the cheapest trip on the list, which was 50 quid to Aberdeen. And that was about as spiritual as our decision got, and collided with our destiny when we came through the doors here. So I think the first time we came, 2009, we left saying, whatever we do in the future, we'd love it to feel like that. The way, the values of leadership, the way the church was built, and the kind of the culture, I guess, that was here. So anyway, that just left with that. 2 years later, came back again on another mission trip, and both in separate cars, going across the border at Gretna. God spoke to us and said, welcome home. This is going to be your home. And both of us panicked and thought, how we're going to tell the other person that we think that we're going to end up moving to Scotland. But sure enough, it kind of came together. So a couple of years later after that, 2013, 7 years ago, we moved up, and the rest is history, I guess. Made the leap.
Amazing.
So yeah.
so good how it wasn't a job that kind of attracted you. It was a connection, and I think
that's right.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? Like the culture is so much more important than the role. That's so true. And you guys as a church have been through a lot. Like they say, there's been something you can go into the details there, but some pretty exponential growth. Like it's not all about numbers, but
sure.
We count people because people count and all that kind of stuff. And you guys have grown to pretty large, and therefore just gone through a massive building project, which I've followed on social media, and you guys have got an amazing building and some amazing technology to film with drones and stuff. So guys, go and check out King's Instagram to get an amazing taste of their amazing building. You've taken over a local conference centre, is that right?
Yes, a conference centre, yeah. So a number of years ago, they couldn't attract the big acts up to Aberdeen because it was about an 8,000 capacity in the main arena, which we haven't got. It's been demolished at the back of the building. So they couldn't attract some of the big acts. So they knew that to kind of, there's this whole thing of Aberdeen as the oil, or had been the oil capital of Europe, but with oil in massive decline, there's a whole renaissance kind of happening to try and rejuvenate this region and area away from oil, which has been so dependent on for the last 50 years or so. So one of the things was to build a new kind of huge arena, which made the old exhibition centre and smaller arena available. And we began the conversations. And yeah, it has been an absolute miraculous journey to obtaining that building. Just on back to the growth thing, it's funny, King's has never had a year where it spiked in growth. We've never had kind of a revival year or anything. It's been year on year cumulative growth. So we'd probably sit, if we averaged, about 11% growth per year. Couple of years of stagnation when the oil was struggling, less people coming into the city, but over probably, certainly the time I've been here, last 10 years, just little by little, bit by bit, just 10%, 11% growth. It's amazing how quickly something grows when you get that much growth. So just to encourage you, I think all churches always hope for that day when loads of people come through the door, but we've just tried to be good at the welcome, tried to include people, make sure they get connected, and just bit by bit, it's grown to where we are today. So, yeah.
Healthy kingdom principles of multiplication.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And so your guys' story with the building now, often when the buildings, people start talking about money and they start talking about all the practical stuff, which obviously has been a big part of the journey for you guys. But what I've seen again from a distance it's been a real like prayer. You've included the whole church in this kind of prayerful journey. It wasn't like this building became available when you went for it. You've been praying for years and years for like this opportunity before you ever knew, I guess, about the exhibition centre. Can you share anything with us about like how that journey has been? Like, how have you kind of pursued the opportunity for finding a building, but at the same time, not tried to just make it happen, but prayerfully just sought God on that? What's that look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, before we had even come, there was a reality of we need a new building. The church had gone to 2 services about 2011. And there is a reality in this old Church of Scotland building that we were meeting in. It doesn't talk of relevance and accessibility. Even coming off the front street, you come up about 20 steps from the street to the main hall, which obviously in the day that it was built was supposed to make you feel inferior and kind of coming to God in penance, but in our culture today where people don't have the context of faith, it's just a huge barrier. So we knew that we needed a building that was going to talk about relevance, not coolness, but relevance to that this is a building that people feel comfortable coming into. So there was the journey had begun, and the leadership team at that time had fairly aggressively pursued different options, and nothing seemed to be going. This was great kind of security in God, and they just said, let's stop. They stopped looking, and they just prayed and spent probably about 3-4 years, just left it with God, and didn't go looking and chasing. So it probably was about 2015. We were really at capacity on our two morning services and the evening service, trying to figure out how we could get more capacity, how many more chairs could we squeeze in. And then we started to say, we really need to start pursuing now and actively looking. It's funny how your faith grows. We pursued one piece of land. We pursued a warehouse literally opposite the church. There's a warehouse there. And we pursued that fairly purposefully, and it never came to anything. And so at one point we had every piece of land in the city, every building, and we went through them and decided what could be, what couldn't be, whilst all the time praying. But there came to a point when we were like, we really need God's direction. So it would have been October 2016 we were preaching a series called Grand Designs, talking about the church and, you know, the body of the church and living stones, everything like that. And Ian one morning said, set your alarms 7:27 in the morning, 7:27 in the evening, based on 2 Samuel 7:27. In the New Living Translation, it talks about this idea that God will build your house. It's God's promise to David, you know, in the whole journey of building the temple, that God would build this house. It would be that he would do it. It would be a dynasty of kings. And of course, in the New Living Translation, it says a dynasty of kings, we're kings. So it's this kind of tenuous, out of context link, but it helped give people a handle to catch on to. And so for the last 4 years, whenever you've been with folk from Kings at 7:27 in the morning or 7:27 at night, their alarms have gone off, and people have shot up a one-word prayer, or some people have spent a bit of time praying at that time, but it's kind of brought the consciousness of we're seeking God for this. So then we were still pursuing stuff, and it was so funny. Sorry for all these dates, but just trying to get the time. 2018, spring of 2018, Ian had met somebody, our senior pastor had met somebody in a coffee shop behind the exhibition centre, and had driven past it and fired a quick email to our agent who was looking at all these properties. And we've got the email still. It's a great email. He says, just drove past the exhibition centre. What is happening with that? Wonder if we could consider some part of the building that, you know, say, is it being knocked down? What's going on? So that hunch, the kind of holy hunch or a whim, came back then that our agent had a conversation with the council, said, I think there's something here. And so the journey spiraled over those next couple of years. And probably, as you guess, there's miracle after miracle of kind of, oh, wow, that the next step's been taken. You know, it wasn't a signed deal from the next day. It was would this. So there was a lot of opportunities for we really need to pray and seek breakthrough. And it all just kept falling. There was just the dominoes kept falling to the point where now that we own it, it still feels a bit like somebody's going to come along and say, no, this isn't quite, this hasn't worked out, but it's here we are. So yeah, it has been a very prayerful journey. And it does, you know, we've this phrase that we say sometimes about, you know, God, do something so big that only you could get the glory for it. You know, that it's beyond us. There's no way we could have manufactured this. It's a miracle. God's done it for us. So.
I was at King's 2 summers ago, and I was in a meeting the first evening I was there, and at 7:27, it started at 7. 27 minutes into the meeting, everyone's alarm goes off. I had no context for why. Yeah. So someone who was sitting next to me just leaned over and said, we pray for our building at 7:27. Yeah, and I thought they pray for their building. I was like, cool. It makes sense. That's absolutely incredible. And one of the things I really picked up when I was up with you guys for a few days, I really picked up a sense of you guys having this kind of harmony, maybe, of we depend on God and like we're prayerful and it's only possible if he brings a breakthrough. But that doesn't mean that we just sit around and wait for God. Like we engage, we push doors, we work hard, and then God does the rest.
Absolutely.
And like one of our values that we're adopting as Connect Church is we depend on God for immeasurably more. Because I think it comes from the place of knowing we can't do the immeasurably more bit. You know, we can do good sermons, but we can't save souls, can we? We can serve, but we can't really bring transformation and justice. It's the work of God. I just wonder, like, anything you want to say about what you've learned about maybe that tension, but also just what it means to depend on God. Like, anything you want to say about that would be amazing. Yeah, definitely.
I think I would see it less of a tension and more of a marriage or an intertwining of these two realities. You know, it's funny, to the right of in our old building, and we're figuring out where we're going to put it in the new building, but is from the 50s when that evangelist came and the church was established, was the word of the scripture of Zechariah 4 verse 6, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. And that is literally to the right of our stage as we've met for years here. And it will be somewhere in our new building. And we consistently talk about that, you know, that it is only by his spirit, it's only by the breath of God that we're going to bring any life and wholeness and healing to our world. and in building church and all these things. But I think we have to also play our part, you know. So we would talk frequently about believing for a move of God, believing, because our church has grown, but it's not enough, because it doesn't even touch 1% of our city. So we consistently pray for a harvest, for God to do something so incredible and miraculous. And yet we have to work really hard until God does something, or alongside God doing something, you know. So I sometimes talk about the church that I grew up in. We very small church, and we would have prayed for, I remember Saturday nights, we set out the chairs and prayed for revival. And I was full of faith. Next day, tons of people were going to show up, you know, and people wouldn't. And when I look back, I think, well, we had no plan of how we would help somebody who wasn't saved. We'd no way of bringing them into faith or helping them on that first journey. We'd no way of welcoming people. We didn't have enough seats to, you know, so many practical things that we could have spent our time doing. And so I think we got to get that marriage. And I talk about it, and maybe a year or so ago, we were doing a series on prayer, and I did a sermon called "The Trellis and the Vine," and I think that image just goes right the way through church, because church is about family and life, and we and the organicness of church. You know, it's people together, and it should be that way. You know, you don't want structure and organization and plans and strategies. There's no life in them. It's people is where the life is. But if you have life with no structure and plan and strategy, it either it can only grow so far, or it drops off and begins going the wrong direction. And so, you know, I love gardening and growing stuff. So you would always you need a trellis to grow a good vine. It needs something to cling to. But of course, the beauty isn't in the trellis. The beauty is in the life, the vine that's growing up. So we would talk about that in church, that we never want the structure to overtake the life. I'd rather have a vine that's going wild and try and train it in than a whole big structure with no life on it. But you have to have both. And so we're living in the miracle of this building, but behind it is heaps of structure that is enabling us to actually manage this building and keep it going. Because we need it. The life can't be sustained without that structure behind. So I wouldn't see it as an either or, it's an and both. You know, I'm trying to remember that quote of somebody said, you know, pray as if it all depends on God and work as if it all depends on us. Maybe Hudson Taylor, somebody like that.
I've heard Mark Batterson say it, but he might.
Yeah, he said it, yeah. Well, Tom Seal said it now. Yeah.
That'll work for me.
Yeah. So yeah, we have to believe that God will grow the thing and bring the life, but then also let's have the structure ready behind to sustain that.
Yeah, very, very good. And I guess like one of the things that you guys, again, another thing I saw happen at King's is. You made that very much a corporate thing. So obviously setting alarms is one, but that's a very practical thing. But I got the sense while I was there that it wasn't just like you and the senior pastors and stuff praying for a building. It had become like we are, you know, like you're saying, we are a family. We're going to depend on God together. And there was very much a shared responsibility to that. I didn't get the sense, and obviously I only saw a glimpse of it, but I didn't get a sense it was like everybody else was waiting for you guys to crack on with it. I think that's a beautiful picture. That trellis and vine is really helpful, and maybe something for people to understand about Connect Church for us is it's that tension, and like you said, much better, that marriage of let's put in place a structure and a model that can sustain what we expect to happen in the future. So we're going to be about multiplication and growth, and let's design ourselves, shape ourselves in a way that can actually do that. But let's not think if we get the structure perfect, it will happen. And I think that's one thing I've really learned over the last kind of 18 months is actually the structures are important, but they are second, aren't they, to God?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
His strategy is the strategy. Like what he says goes kind of thing. I think that's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that kind of corporate sense of how you've done that, like how you as a church have moved forward, or how, like you've mentioned about it being quite a prayerful thing. I feel like corporate prayer is clearly a key thing for Kings.
Absolutely. Yeah, huge thing. And we would regularly structure and put in trellis that allows people to bring life to prayer, and trying to engage as many ways in doing that. I mean, the first thing that we've done since COVID restrictions, and the first thing that we did in the new building, was pray and have a prayer meeting. We felt it kind of just came out of who we are, and we went, oh, isn't that good that worked out like that? You know, it wasn't a kind of, we must make this prayer, it just so happened, but it is just such a priority that we have to pray. We have to seek God for these things. Otherwise it's not going to happen. You know, so being on our knees, praying for ourselves, praying for things going on. And I think, you know, we hear so much in church land and church world about programs and structures and systems that other successful churches have built, and often we want to take that off the shelf and put it plug and play, and, you know, if I do that, then this will work. And, you know, we have wrestled with how we disciple people the whole time that I've been here. And fundamentally, you come down and realize programs don't disciple people, people disciple people. So you can set a program as long as you've got the right people in place to run that. But we've worked on these amazing plans of, they're going to do this, and then they're going to start going here, and then they'll do this course, and then they'll be a fully mature believer. And you realize and look back on your own journey and go, I had no structure, no intentionality, but people that came alongside me, people that invested in me. So we would try and consistently, you know, it came to a point when, you know, in our kind of larger meetings and AGM style thing with everyone gathered, and I had to present on discipleship, I would say, it's up to you how we disciple people. You sitting there, it's up to you how we do this, because you're the people that disciple. We all disciple. It's not a program or a structure that's going to do that. So we're consistently talking about that, and that idea of, you know, you're not coming to observe and spectate. We are all part of the body, and it is the danger of platforms and microphones and rows, is that people think there's those that do the ministry and us that observe and receive the ministry being done. And we have to shift that for the church to be what biblically the church is.
So true.
Every believer.
So true. And that I was really challenged on this recently, you know, because as we start with Connect, the temptation is to try and put in the right programs in the right places and do a perfect calendar of how you're going to move people along, pipelines and all this stuff.
Sure.
And actually, the thing I've been really challenged about is, you know, when it says like to equip the saints for works of service, to equip, you need to give them equipment. You know, it's tools, not programs, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We as kind of church staff, if you like, or pastors, whatever. I can't disciple everyone, but hopefully I can give some people some tools so they can disciple people.
That's right.
Rather than, hey, come to my Alpha course, or come to my Learning to Grow course, or come to my 12 steps to whatever here's what it means to disciple someone, then go and do it. And again, that's that depending on God bit again, isn't it? Of like, don't depend on a program, don't depend on a structure, don't depend on a pastor.
That's right. Yeah.
Depend on your relationship with God and sharing that way.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, you're a voice and a leader that we would love to speak into the life of our church. So our contexts are completely different. You know, Aberdeen and Scunthorpe are completely different. You're oil, we're steel. You're just building the biggest church building on the planet, and we're going multi-congregation. But I'm a firm believer that kingdom principles and prophetic and apostolic insight and wisdom applies to the church, the body of Christ.
Sure.
Anything you want to say to us as Connect Church, we would welcome and receive with open arms and praying.
Absolutely.
No pressure, but anything you want to say to our family today.
So I think, you know, one of the big things would just be never limit God. You know, he is the Ephesians 3:20 God, which has been our verse for this whole 3 years of journeying here, really holding on to that and saying, you know, God is the God of the immeasurably more, the superabundant. And, you know, people would never have written where we are now back in 93, you know, as a church. You'd never have guessed it in how things were back then. And it was just a steady, and I guess constantly putting on the bigger jacket, just what do we need to do just for that next little nudge, you know. Even our journey with this building, there's parts about this building, there's not enough time to go into the detail, but there were parts that at one point we didn't have faith for. And we were talking about partnerships and giving pieces of the building away, you know, bringing people in to help us manage the building. And we went on convoluted journeys and then came out and said, I think we could do this, you know, because God just needed us to just rise our faith up at that next level. And so constantly building towards, well, what do we need to do just for that next, if 20 more people came, what would we need to do that? And then live there. And then when they've come, what do we, you know, just constantly nudging forward. And, you know, I think, like I said earlier, you know, I think often encounter Christians thinking, well, my church is going to double in a week, you know, that because you hear those stories and we love them, you know, the church exploded, but far more sustainable is just little by little and just constantly going for the next. So believe for the immeasurably more, but then, you know, week by week, just believe for that next step. And I think then you begin looking back the last 5 years, the last 10 years and going, look what God has done, you know. It's been incredible. And I think these are such crucial conversations because Kings is not perfect and we don't do things slick. We're not cool. We don't aspire to be those things or have ambition for those things. But people feel they're part of our family. So when they come, what we work hard at is not impressing them with how well set up we are. What we try and do is love them and bring them in. So then people, and that's a wrestle that we consistently face as we grow larger and larger. But this, you know, people, it's a culture that gets people. So it's so important that you have conversations like this because it's who you are that will determine what kind of family you become, no matter what size you are. You know, they say the values haven't changed since there was 100 people in this church. The values are still the same. The way that we work has definitely changed, but who we are fundamentally, I guess the personality of Kings is the same as when you would have come when there was 100 people. So it's so important to nail that down and to really commit to this is who we are as a church, not who we are as Tom and Debbie or as the leadership team, but actually who all of us are in the life of this church. We all own and we all imbibe this spirit. You know, one of the things is about generosity, hospitality, this whole idea, you know, that we don't do small portions. we don't hold back or charge people for things, you know, it's just, and then we encourage people, grab somebody for lunch. If there's new people, take them home with you and go. And back in the day, every new person got a personal invite for lunch, but we can't do that anymore. But we need everybody in the life of the church to be doing that, all that organic life stuff that makes church. And you just cannot rely on a welcome system or a welcome team to bring that sense of family. And that's what, well, certainly I know I'm not from a Christian family. When I walked in church, that was what made my jaw drop, was the sense of family and love and this community of people that was nothing like I'd ever experienced. And I didn't care about any of the structures or any of the things that were being done or even what was coming off the platform, but it was about all of the other stuff, the intangibles. So commit to those things, to the culture of who you're setting out to be. And I think that's what brings people, and that's what ultimately the church truly is. And I think God blesses that. God lives in that space, not in the kind of programs and platform space.
That's really encouraging and really challenging, which is a perfect combination. So we really appreciate that. And we will continue to pray for you guys in Kings, and particularly as you at some point get the chance to actually use your building to its full capacity post all this crazy situation that's going on. Just believing for the day when that place is rammed out and you're looking for another place. They've already built the new arena, so that's for you.
Yeah,
next.
exactly. Yeah. People have already started saying, when are we going to get that? You know, for our church, they think nothing is impossible now. We'll just take every building.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Bless you
here and
guys.
praying for you guys. I mean, privileged to be chatting, and for everybody that's going to watch this as part of what will be Connect Church. Great days ahead. And I think, from the story I hear, there was a significance in Kings used to be AOG, Aberdeen, Assemblies of God, Aberdeen. And there was a significance when there was a sense of identity that was matched into who we were hoping to be as a church, which is exactly what you're doing here. When Ian renamed the church King's Community Church, and he set down the values and spent a long time talking about them, and it shifted who we are. It gave an identity, it gave a rallying call to bring people around. So not in a cookie cutter way, but in a principle way. I'm believing for great things as you guys set out on this journey as something fresh. And Joshua 3, when they gather at the River Jordan to go into the promised land, and I love it. I think it's verse 5. It talks about they've been waiting there 3 days, and Joshua says to them, consecrate yourselves, for the Lord is about to do amazing things among you. In that sense, every church is in this sense of waiting and kind of wanting to cross over. And for you guys, I guess what is amazing in what Joshua said to them is not practice your warfare skills, not let's do our army drills, let's practice building a bridge, or any of these things. It's consecration, setting ourselves apart, seeking God's face, praying, believing, because that was the most important thing they could have done in those 3 days.